Planet Earth, modern day. What is going on? What kind of future are we inheriting? Everywhere we turn, there's seemingly a crisis. One after another, mounting up, building towards some sort of nightmarish crescendo. When one tries to take an inventory of the problems humanity faces, you cannot help but stand in awe at the enormity of the challenges before us. The restriction of freedoms by governments around the world. The rise of police states and surveillance grids. The threat of global war. Economic collapse and wealth evisceration. A predatory elite class feeding off the public through taxes, bailouts, insider trading, plush government contracts. You name it. The degeneration of knowledge through scientifically created government propaganda campaigns. Demonization of individuals who think for themselves outside of the pop culture fantasy world of television. Widespread depression and hopelessness. Mass drugging of the population that shuts off normal emotions, turning people into zombies. And the list goes on and on. What's the root cause of all these problems? Why are we fighting amongst ourselves? Why do we feel separated? Why are we divided? Many astronauts, when viewing the Earth from space, have noticed what should be obvious, that the borders which exist on the maps do not exist on our planet. These illusionary borders separate the world from, well, itself. Just knowing that old governments are dissolved and new ones are formed is enough to show that borders are merely temporarily agreed upon myths. Does the delusion stop with countries' borders? What other borders exist within our experience that divide our reality in two? And what might be the most fundamental of such divides? The following seeks to answer such questions. Our reality view, as we might call it, encompasses not only our relationship to our external other, or world, but also to our internal other, or ideal. The world is that which we experience with the five senses. The ideal, however, is the invisible overarching reality that is accessible only through thoughts and feelings. For some, the ideal is equivalent to God or religion. For others, it may be the physical laws of the universe or philosophy. Our reality view can be described as our relationship with the world and the ideal. But it can be broken down further than that into the realms of government, economy, mind, and heart. Each of these four realms, or spheres, has a central struggle. Within the government, our struggle is between freedom and slavery. Within the economy, our struggle is between wealth and poverty. Within the mind, our struggle is between knowledge and ignorance. Within the heart, our struggle is between innocence and guilt. Each of us seeks freedom, wealth, knowledge, and innocence, while trying to escape slavery, poverty, ignorance, and guilt. Each of us also employs filtering systems to help us with these goals. Within the government, our filter is law, which sorts peace and violence. Within the economy, our filter is property, which sorts yours and mine. Within the mind, our filter is logic, which sorts truth and falsehood. Within the heart, our filter is conscience, which sorts good and bad. How do these filters work? Essentially, each of these filters operates in the same fashion. Although this may seem strangely esoteric at first, they all rotate around the concept of separation. Each filter is designed to sense certain forms of separation, and when they do, they filter out or sort out a form of separation in response. If the filter does not sense separation, in other words, it senses non-separation, then the filter sorts out or maintains non-separation as well. All of the filters can then be generalized by the conditional statement. If separation, then separation. All separation is a response to separation, or at least perceived separation. The forms of separation differs from filter to filter and from person to person, but this same model underlies each. Let's take a look at some examples to make some sense of this. Law sorts peace and violence. Your natural resting state is peace, so law instructs you when to be in a state of violence. Violence is a state of separation, a separation between yourself and another. Violence in this context does not only mean the physical trespass against another's body, but any experience of being separate from another, including unspoken anger. Law defines what qualifies another to be in a state of violence in relation to yourself, and also what qualifies as a just responding state of violence. So if violence, then violence. All violence is a response to violence. An eye for an eye is an obvious example, but this even applies in more complex and extreme scenarios like rape. For example, if a man comes on to a woman and she rejects his advances, he could respond by following her and raping her. Her rejection was the violence or separation between them, and his raping her is the just, in his view, responding state of violence. It is important to keep in mind that it does not matter if you agree that some state or some act justly qualifies as a form of violence that deserves violence in return, but only that violence is always in response to the perceived violent state of another towards us. Property sorts yours and mine. Your natural resting state is yours. That is, you aren't actively trying to prevent others from using, in some manner, your external surroundings. However, your property filter will sort mine, which is a state of separation, a separation between yourself and your surroundings from another. Property defines what qualifies as an initiation of this mine, and also defines what is a proper responding state of mine. So, if mine, then mine. If you perceive another to be denying you the enjoyment of your surroundings, we label that as them initiating mine. In turn, you respond with mine. All mine is a response to mine. If no one ever, whether in reality or perception, tried to deny you the enjoyment of your external surroundings, then there would be no use for the concept of mine. Mine is only necessary to react against the other's mine. As with law, it is only important at this stage to understand that the experience of the concept of mine is always in response to a perceived advancement of another's mine. Logic sorts truth and falsehood. Your natural resting state is truth. That is, you aren't experiencing a separation between your thoughts and the ideal. Falsehood is a state of separation, a separation between your thoughts and the mind of the ideal. When you have a thought pass through your mind that is labeled as falsehood, the ideal responds with a confirmatory falsehood. So, if falsehood, then falsehood. The self always initiates the falsehood, and the ideal responds likewise. The ideal can never initiate falsehood, because simply, it's the ideal. The ideal never has thoughts of falsehood, unless it's to respond to our thoughts of falsehood. The self, however, can have a whole myriad of thoughts, some truth and some falsehood, which the ideal will mirror. Our conscious filter works in a near identical method as our logic filter operates. Conscious sorts good and bad. Your natural state is good. That is, you aren't experiencing a separation between your feelings and the ideal. Bad is a state of separation, a separation between your feelings and the heart of the ideal. When you have a feeling in your heart that is labeled as bad, the ideal responds with a confirmatory bad. So, if bad, then bad. The self always initiates what is bad, and the ideal responds likewise. The ideal can never initiate anything bad because simply It's the ideal. The ideal never has feelings of what is bad unless it's to respond to our feelings of what is bad. The self, however, can have a wide variety of feelings, some good and some bad, which the ideal will mirror. Now, although we use law, property, logic, and conscience, these will take on different forms from person to person. These different forms can be grouped into two general camps. Other possibilities will be discussed later. The two basic sides are simply the just beginning and the just end, also known as the left-right paradigm. We will first identify the just beginning and the just end for the four spheres, and then explain each of them in more depth. The just beginning of law is respect. The just end of law is tolerance. The just beginning of property is creation. The just end of property is sharing. The just beginning of logic is faith. The just end of logic is reason. The just beginning of conscience is non-desire. The just end of conscience is non-judgment. Why are these various principles the just beginning or the just end of their relative spheres? Respect and tolerance are easily demonstrated through a little example. A host of a party invites a guest to her house. The host has one law to attend her party, that the guest must take off his shoes to come inside. Now, if the guest does not comply, and the host does not budge from her law, then violence will ensue. The host will react with violence, a violence that could range from as little as quiet anger to as much as murder. Respect and tolerance quell the potential violence at the beginning or the end of the situation, respectively. The guest can be respectful and obey the request of the host, thereby avoiding the conflict at the beginning. The host can be tolerant and allow the guest to be inside her house with his shoes on, thereby avoiding the conflict at the end. Creation and sharing are the two standard strategies for escaping poverty and obtaining wealth. Creation seeks to solve the problem at the beginning and advises that we create our way out of poverty by creating more property. Sharing does not see a problem with the amount of property available. It only sees a problem with the equitable distribution of available property. It simply wants all to have an equal portion and thereby share our way out of poverty, solving the problem at the end. Faith and reason are the two normal ways of obtaining knowledge. Faith is your axioms, while reason is your theorems. Faith seeks to escape ignorance into knowledge at the beginning by identifying the fundamental, yet technically unexplainable truths that are inherently true. Reason tries to deliver us from ignorance into knowledge by reaching for the end of logic, that which is somehow provable by a long series of inferences. Non-desire and non-judgment are the two methods of trying to avoid guilt and achieve a state of innocence. We could say that guilt arises from a two-step process. First, we feel desire, and then we feel judgment. Non-desire seeks to solve the problem at the beginning by removing desire. Non-judgment seeks to solve the problem at the end through eliminating judgment. We will now take a step back and systematically construct what we are discussing. In a very basic one-dimensional understanding, the spectrum of reality views could be divided into two groups. The quintessential us versus them, the ultimate left-right paradigm. Although some may view reality in strictly these two camps alone, many have moved beyond this level to a two-dimensional understanding, splitting this spectrum into an external spectrum and an internal spectrum. The external spectrum is as follows. This depicts only the two extremes, but it could very well be split up at various points, as in this example. We could continue the dividing process and split the external spectrum into its law and property subparts. The law spectrum. and the property spectrum. These two can be combined into a single two-dimensional external spectrum, giving us this. Others have created similar charts. Before going further, we will now repeat this process for the internal realm. This depicts only the two extremes, but it could very well be split up at various points, as in this example. We could continue the dividing process and split the internal realm into its two subparts of logic and conscience, the logic spectrum. And the conscious spectrum. These two can be combined into a single two-dimensional internal spectrum, giving us this. Others have created similar charts. We have constructed both an external and internal two-dimensional spectrum. Each of these has 4 possible positions, giving us a grand total of 4 times 4, or 16 possible positions overall in a combined 4-dimensional spectrum of reality views. The 16 possible positions can be summed up as So, for example, if your reality view were the combination secular individualism, you would be associated with tolerance, creation, reason, non-judgment. You may be able to identify your own reality view that you lean to most amongst one of these 16. We've come a long way already, expanding from the 2 initial viewpoints up to 16 possibilities. The central question then becomes, which of these 16 best takes us to our stated goals of freedom, wealth, knowledge, and innocence? Do any of them rise to this occasion? The simple answer for now is no. All 16 positions still filter violence. All 16 positions still filter mine. All 16 positions still filter falsehood. All 16 positions still filter bad. Can one have unbridled freedom with violence still present? No. Violence restricts freedom and leads to slavery. Only in a state of peace does one have freedom. Can one have limitless wealth with mind still present? No. Mind limits wealth and leads to poverty. Only in a state of yours does one have wealth. Can one have perfect knowledge with falsehood still present? No. Falsehood clouds knowledge and leads to ignorance. Only in a state of truth does one have knowledge. Can one have absolute innocence with bad still present? No. Bad ruins innocence and leads to guilt. Only in a state of good does one have innocence. How do we overcome these hurdles? The answer lies in looking at the higher and lower forms of each of these 8 fundamental principles. The lower form of respect is respect violence. If law is requesting you to be in a state of violence, you respectfully obey this law and separate yourself from the other person. The higher form of respect is respect peace. If law is requesting you to be in a state of peace, even if it is in a different state of peace than you are currently in, then you are respectful to this law. The lower form of tolerance is tolerance peace. If someone is in a state of peace in regards to you, you are tolerant of them in this state and do not exercise the violence that you could carry out. The higher form of tolerance is tolerance violence. If someone is in a state of violence towards you, You are tolerant of them in this state. In other words, forgiveness. We can now construct a two-dimensional model of law. Freedom is the synthesis of respect, peace, and tolerance, violence. The political understanding that embodies this synthesis is called anarcho-pacifism. Anarcho-pacifism is the strain of political thought where the desire for total freedom and total peace meet. It is the realization that not only is state law in opposition to freedom, but all personal law we enforce as well. It seeks to eliminate tyranny at its ultimate source, the tyrant ruling within us. Essentially, all other political philosophies are systems of violence devised supposedly to control or limit violence. Anarcho-pacifism is different in that it sees no separation between means and ends. Do we want to live in a peaceful world? Then we must be at peace with all humanity. It's really that simple. Now, when we hear the anarchism portion of anarcho-pacifism, we might be tempted to think this must be an oxymoron. Doesn't anarchism want the destruction of society, the burning down of cities, and general mass chaos? While a limited number of historical anarchists of non-pacifist strains have advocated for targeted violence, many, if not most, have distanced themselves from such practices. Anarchism is the burning drive for a liberated humanity, not the destruction of order. As the famous anarchist sign symbolizes, anarchy is order. Take a look at your own personal political evolution. Were you a Democrat, then a liberal, then maybe a left-leaning libertarian or anarchist? Or perhaps you were a Republican, then a conservative, then maybe a right-leaning libertarian or anarchist. Notice your personal pattern. You have been on a journey of eliminating violence you deem legitimate. Little by little, you have been weeding it out from your consciousness. Your path from the left or from the right is transcended in anarcho-pacifism, where all violence is seen as useless. This strain of thought leaves you in some good company, too. While there is no true founder, and its expression can be found stretching back as far as we can see, in modern times it came to us through the likes of Henry David Thoreau and Leo Tolstoy. Mohandas Gandhi, deeply influenced by these two, took the theory to praxis in a dramatic way in India. There are a multitude of others who aren't quite household names that have been preaching and practicing this understanding up to the present day. So if you want inspiration, you certainly won't have to suffer from lack of supply. Now, as far as how to start applying this understanding to our lives, there are the historical methods, like civil disobedience, refusing to pay taxes, refusing military draft, boycotts, and even jury nullification can be seen as a tactic of anarcho-pacifism. But also embraced by this philosophy is not just how to interact with government, but how we interact with everyone. We must learn to respect the peaceful requests of others. And we must learn to tolerate those who don't live by our own standards, our own laws, even those we deem being in violent opposition to us. This is freedom. To be free of violence through the understanding that you are not separate from everyone else. You can be free now because you are free now. You only need to realize it. The lower form of creation is creation mine. You create to enrich yourself. The higher form of creation is creation yours. You create to enrich others. The lower form of sharing is sharing yours. You try to get others to share what they have. The higher form of sharing is sharing mine. You share with others what you have. We can now construct a two-dimensional model of property. Wealth is the synthesis of creation yours and sharing mine. The economic understanding that embodies this synthesis is called the gift economy. gift economy is the economy of goods and services that circulate as gifts. One reaction that some may have when first hearing about the gift economy is, so how does it work? This question begs our built-in bias towards economics as a quid pro quo system, or one that at least has mechanisms that ensure what we personally get is somehow fair. But with gifts, you do not get goods, services, or money in return. Otherwise, they wouldn't be gifts. On the other hand, this does not mean that you get nothing in return. The things you do get, like trust, relationship, community, reputation, and status, are arguably of more lasting value than any one-time transaction. When someone gives you a gift, the natural reaction is gratitude. This gratitude blossoms into near immediate trust towards the giver and towards life in general. The more gifts we receive, the less likely we feel we're going to experience severe lack, knowing that life blesses us with unexpected bounties. Also, we feel a debt to the giver, not the normal debt of painful obligation, but a joyous debt of truly wanting to give back to them in some way, somehow. There is a revolution of sorts occurring within the fringes of economics and anthropology that is rediscovering our ancient roots to this understanding. What we've been taught in school, that the origins of the modern economy is an evolution from primordial barter systems, is receiving a facelift. Anthropologists have discovered that so-called primitive societies did not operate on barter, slowly to be replaced by mediums of universal exchange. Early societies operated on the gift economy. Gift economies became overturned through conquest, and in their place debt servitude became the norm. Over time, money was created to help standardize debt obligations. Although it may seem odd to think of debt predating money, this is what the historical record is speaking to us. At this point, it may be tempting to recognize the idealism of a gift economy, but dismiss it as impractical. While we cannot ignore the challenges it presents, you may be surprised how far along this movement has already come. Maybe you've already heard of it. Ever heard of Linux and the free and open software movement? How about people donating blood or a kidney? Have you ever been couch surfing, enjoying a stranger's hospitality? Most of the content on the internet can be seen as part of the gift economy. The Burning Man Festival is a social experiment that successfully operates with the gift economy with tens of thousands of people for over a week in the Nevada desert. There is also an incredible amount of sharing and gifting networks being developed online and on the local level right now. You can start participating in these, and you can create your own gifts that you would like to give to the world. You have unique gifts that will only be fully realized once they are utilized for the service of others. This is wealth, to be free of any ultimate concept of mine by understanding that our surroundings are not separate from us. We cannot become poor because our wealth has no limit. Giving is the natural response to the realization of infinite wealth. And you are infinitely wealthy, the royalty of the universe. Only one question remains. What are you going to do with your newfound riches? The lower form of faith is faith falsehood. You put your faith in everyone else who thinks differently than you being wrong. The higher form of faith is faith truth. You put your faith in your own truth. In other words, practicing what you preach. The lower form of reason is reason truth. Learning, researching, proving what you already believe to be true. The higher form of reason is reason falsehood. Learning and researching about that what you believe to be false. We can now construct a two-dimensional model of logic. Knowledge is the synthesis of faith truth and reason falsehood. The logical understanding that embodies this synthesis is called trivialism. Trivialism, the position that everything is ultimately true, and by extension also false. At first glance, seems to be the very definition of insanity. In fact, that's what the grandfather of logic, Aristotle, argued over 2,300 years ago. You see, the classical logic he created could be said to have been a reaction to the widespread trivialist thinkers and teachers of his day. From the time Aristotle developed his 3 laws, or axioms of thought, his ideas regarding logic reigned unquestionably supreme over 2 millennia. Then something strange started occurring. A little over a century ago, much in the same way Einstein overthrew Newton, logicians began re-examining Aristotle's 3 axioms. What they found is that his axioms explode inside their own rubric. By using his logic alone, it was discovered you could prove that everything was true. In other words, trivialism. Since logicians' stock in trade is being able to determine what is inherently false, they knew his system was in error. So what was their response? Create new logic systems, of course. And now we witness the emergence of non-classical logics, dozens and dozens of them, with new ones being developed all the time. And much like with Aristotle's critics, it doesn't take too long until logicians come around to prove that these new systems, one by one, also explode into trivialism. So the search for the holy grail of logic continues. The question becomes, how many logic systems does humanity need to create that continue to collapse like a house of cards, proving everything is true before we throw in the towel on this failed endeavor? Every system, when pushed to its extremes, explodes into the same end. But what does this mean? What exactly could be the benefit of accepting such a seemingly wild notion as trivialism? And does anyone seriously hold such a position? We are standing at the gates of this all-encompassing understanding emerging from the shadows. Recently, Dr. Paul Kolby published the first book-length defense of trivialism. Others, like Dr. Luis Estrada Gonzalez, have now demonstrated trivialism is literally impossible to disprove. Some are focusing on the trivialist nature of natural language, like Dr. Jody Azuni, while others still explore mathematics and other fields. Timothy Freak has his own name for it, paralogical thinking. It's a minority position for sure, but one that is arguably destined to make its triumphant announcement on the world stage. Now, how would we start applying trivialism? We can start by reversing how we look at knowledge. The conventional path toward knowledge is to solely identify how everything is separate, to categorize things into smaller and smaller subset groups. Trivialism encourages knowledge through realizing how everything, even opposites, are one and the same. First, start having faith and putting to practice what you believe to be true. It's difficult to fully realize the truth of what you believe if you're not putting it to use. And secondly, if you want to study what you identify as your antithesis. It's hard to study something for too long without eventually being able to see it through the eyes of that perspective. You may even come to know how your belief and your opposing belief are each aspects of something greater. Trivialism doesn't have to be anything technical, but it can be as complex of an endeavor as you want it to be. You can essentially recognize that everything you've ever experienced is true, and that you've actually never experienced any falsehood, as that would be impossible. But of course, you have also experienced falsehood many times, as falsehood is also true. So what then is knowledge? This is knowledge. To be free of falsehood by understanding your thoughts are not separate from the ideal. This present moment, you have the fulfillment of all knowledge. Only recognize what is in front of your face and know that which you already know. The lower form of non-desire is non-desire bad. You don't desire what you feel is bad. The higher form of non-desire is non-desire good. You don't desire even what you feel is good. You're content now. The lower form of non-judgment is non-judgment good. You don't judge what you feel is good. The higher form of non-judgment is non-judgment bad. You don't judge even what you feel is bad. We can now construct a two-dimensional model of conscience. Innocence is the synthesis of non-desire good and non-judgment bad. The understanding of conscience that embodies this synthesis is called optimism. Optimism is the understanding that you are currently experiencing your optimal state. It is not, as some may suppose, an irrational hope in the betterment of things to come, but instead an acceptance and a joy over the present moment. Hardships and struggles are interpreted as being necessary components of growth and are therefore embraced rather than feared. Optimism allows you to rebound from life's challenges and integrate what you've learned rather than wallow in self-pity, guilt, and depression. And although we can broadly group people into being optimists or pessimists, a large portion of us don't view it this way. Many people view themselves as realists, and the other group as pie-in-the-sky optimistic dreamers, doomed to disappointment. The self-identified realists see humanity and the world in a fallen state, corrupted. Man is inherently bad, so says mainstream theology and secular psychology. Goodness is temporary, fleeting, and never seen as an aspect of our basic nature. It seems much of humanity has taken a placebo pill of evil, manifesting it into being because we believe it to be real. But this system of feelings can be transcended, and there's good reason to believe we are in the midst of such a sea change. While optimism can be seen emerging from the writings of our earliest teachers and mystics, the first generally recognized hardcore defense of optimism came to us from Gottfried Wilhelm von Leibniz in the early 18th century. In modern times, we've witnessed the birth of the positive thinking movement, and even more recently, positive psychology. Positive psychology is the empirical study of what makes us happy, what makes us thrive, and what it is uncovering is huge. It is discovering that our happiness, our return to innocence, is in large part determined by the level of optimism we operate on. Pessimism is the primary cause of guilt, and in persistent cases, depression. Positive psychology pioneer Dr. Martin Seligman coined the phrase learned optimism in his study of rehabilitating pessimistic attitudes because optimism can be learned. In present day, new and colorful expressions of this philosophy are being expressed through the optimistic rebel Rob Brezsny. Rob Brezsny promotes pronoia, the belief that the whole world is conspiring to shower you with blessings. Just imagine how reality might appear if you were to look at it through the fresh eyes of this childlike innocence. So how do we start to see through these eyes of optimism? Start by trying to eliminate any desire for anything you consider good. Recognize that by desiring anything, even good things, you are declaring your present state deficient. You are saying, hey, the goodness is over there, but too bad I'm right here. It separates you from realizing the amazing goodness that surrounds you right here, right now. And on the flip side, attempt to stop judging that what you believe to be bad. When we engage in judgment, we always declare the present moment corrupted. Desire seeks to pull the goodness towards us, while judgment seeks to push the badness away. Both produce a dissatisfaction of the present. The answer lies in celebrating the eternal now. Be happy now. You deserve it. But how can I be happy with all the negativity and oppression dominating our world? You might ask. Maybe it's time to reanalyze the role of those we deem controlling and destroying planet Earth. Maybe, just maybe, we can realize that without them, our personal growth, to a large degree, wouldn't be happening. It's hard to grow without all these challenges enticing us towards our own evolution. These tyrants that humanity despises have miserable lives, full of unhappiness of almost an unimaginable level. But yet, they are a catalyst for our own awakening. So maybe the proper response is thanking them. Don't just forgive them, thank them. While this might be mistaken for worshiping evil, it's really no different than being grateful for your fever being the hidden mechanism destroying your flu. The fever may seem uncomfortable, but it just may be what saves your life. Likewise, this dark authoritarianism is fueling and catapulting you back into your home state of innocence. And what is innocence? This is innocence. To be free of any ultimate concept of bad by recognizing that your feelings are not separate from the ideal. You are a pure, beautiful, and pristine being right now, just the way you are. Your sins are forgiven, because in the big scheme of things, they never really occurred. Our amazing journey can be characterized as a movement from separation to non-separation. We can generalize a few stops along the way of this real-life pilgrim's progress. In its pure form, complete separation is equivalent to what we call death, even hell. Separation personified becomes the different forms of the supreme negative. The easiest people to identify with this state are those we deem controlling the planet for the worse, whether it be the New World Order, the Illuminati, international bankers, interdimensional reptilians, or your favorite nominee. But on a more basic level, this state is characterized by experiencing chaotic separation. It's pure chaos. There is no reason why you experience violence or mine against another. It just happens. Likewise, there seems to be no reason why the ideal screams falsehood or bad at you either. Much of humanity would identify with experiencing this second state. In this state, there is an organizing system that helps us decode and manage separation. Reality organizes itself around the concept of justice. We can justly be in a state of violence or mine as long as the other is unjustly in a state of violence or mine. Similarly, the ideal can justly be in a state of falsehood or bad as long as we are unjustly in a state of falsehood or bad. In this third state, a new solitary and singular code appears as the only necessary and guiding light, the code of love and non-separation. You are still in correction and movement, but always towards one transcendent goal, to be an embodiment of love itself. When we experience another's violence or mine, we learn to respond with peace and yours. And when we believe we've initiated falsehood and bad, we learn that the ideal responds with truth and good. In its pure form, complete non-separation is equivalent to what we call life, even eternal life. Non-separation personified becomes the different forms of the supreme positive. Now, as far as who's experiencing this state, if you've been paying attention to what the fire of love is teaching, you are experiencing this state. In fact, you always have been. Separation is the illusion that never happened. This state is your true self. This state is your home. You are going home. You are home. Humanity faces radical problems that need radical solutions. Our solution is love born through the realization of non-separation. And as realizations of non-separation give birth to outpourings of love, so do outpourings of love give birth to realizations of non-separation. Understandings such as anarcho-pacifism, the gift economy, trivialism, and optimism are excellent representatives of love in action across the different realms of reality. As such, they are presented here as tangible solutions to the challenges before us. We know that if a kingdom be divided against itself, that kingdom cannot stand. Likewise, if we believe we are separate from everything else, if our reality kingdom be divided, we too shall not stand. Now is the time for us to open our eyes to our mysteriously indivisible, eternal nature. Now is the time for infinite love. Love is our red pill, our exit from the matrix. Love is our enlightenment, our theory of everything. Love is our salvation, our stairway to heaven. Love is our awakening and our resurrection from the dead. Love is our revolution, our realization of utopia. Love is our filterless filter, our axiomless axiom. Where other axioms divide, love unites. Where other paths see two, love sees one. We are this one, and it is our destiny to manifest this understanding within ourselves and outwardly to the world. You are the light of the world. A city that is set on a hill cannot be hid. Neither do men light a candle and put it under a bushel, but on a candlestick, and it gives light unto all that are in the house. Love is the good news you've been waiting for. Love is the good news the world has been waiting for. Now is the time for the good news. Won't you join us in this love revolution now that you're armed with the ultimate weapon of the info war?
Calm. Stand for what you believe in. There's still hope for freedom. Don't bang your head against the wall. Look past what your eyes are seeing. We're all the same from within. Don't judge those who never did you wrong. Everybody in the world, put your hands high. We can make it work, you can be the change that you like. Sick of all the negativity being fed to our minds. Everybody in the world, put your hands high. We can make it work, you can be the change that you like. Sick of all the negativity being fed to our minds.